Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to tonight's exciting main event here at Milton Public Library. And of course, wherever you are this evening, wherever you're watching from, for the meeting of the Miltons with author Morgan Murray to discuss his 2021 CBC Canada Reads long listed novel, Dirty Birds. Here's a copy of it in my hand. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather at Milton Public Library is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. As we come together on these treaty lands, we thank the Mississaugas of the Credit and acknowledge that we have a responsibility to honor and respect the lands, waters, plants, animals, and ancestors who walked here before us. Tonight, we gather here to read, learn, create, and connect, and to be inspired by all of the art, culture, and literature that surrounds us here in Milton, Ontario. And we really want to get to the bottom of a mystery that has consumed us here at Milton Public Library since we read with great interest about a book besmirching our town's good name. That book is Dirty Birds, published by Breakwater Books. And I'm just going to read the excerpt from the back for anyone who hasn't had a chance to read through the whole book yet. In late 2007, as the world's economy crumbles, the remarkably unremarkable Milton, Ontario, not to be confused with Milton, Ontario, leaves his parents' basement in Saskatchewan and sets forth to find fame, fortune, and love in the electric sexuality of Montreal, to bask in endless millennial adolescence, to escape the infinite flatness of Saskatchewan, and to find his messiah, Leonard Cohen. So please join me in welcoming tonight's guest of honor, or shame, we'll see how this conversation goes, Morgan Murray. Just gotta click a button here, Morgan. There we go. Welcome to Milton, Ontario, Morgan.
Hello. Thank you for having me, I think.
No, it's all good. I'm starting the night contentious. I am wearing a Toronto Maple Leafs sweater.
I didn't want to say, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of Habs in this book, so I just wanted to start off fighting. And I just realized my husband's watching, and this is his shirt, so sorry, Dan. Okay, so Morgan, before we get into all of the controversy that your book has introduced into our sweet little town, we'd like to get to know you as a person. So I'm going to hand it over to you for a few minutes. You can introduce yourself, give us a bit of your background, your biography, and please tell us about your mom who's here tonight.
Sure. So first of all, my mom, her name is Alice. She said I'm watching her in the comments, and she said she's here to make sure I don't swear. Which, if you've read the book, she's failed miserably. Way to go, Mom. But for those of you who enjoy sewing, my mom has a sewing YouTube channel that she started during the pandemic. So look for mermaid designs on YouTube. There you go.
That was my first question, actually, because you did that. I didn't want to be too creepy and go looking for it, so thank you.
Please do. She's sewing 365 things in a row, one a day.
Okay, so what kinds of things is she sewing?
A new garment every day, like a dress or a outfit. It's crazy.
That's fantastic. Crazy. So
I just wrote a book.
I was reading through all of your reviews, and my favorite was the one at the bottom. It says, "It's good, but do you have to swear so much?" Morgan's mom.
Yeah, she pretends like she's never swore before in her life.
Right.
That's bullshit.
And you're from
so yeah. So yes, I'm Alice's son, Morgan. I grew up in Caroline, Alberta, where Alice still is. It's a little tiny itty bitty middle of nowhere town in west central Alberta. Our claim to fame is it is much like Milton. Ontario has a very famous citizen who invented the screw. We have a very famous person known for spinning things too, Kurt Browning, world's greatest figure skater. Grew up just down the road from where he grew up. I left the farm, went to university. After university, I moved to Montreal to become a famous poet and ladies' man like my hero, Leonard Cohen. It didn't work out. I ended up in Newfoundland at grad school. I was there for a long time. I think the Newfoundland tourism slogan is "Come for the scenery, stay for the fog," because once you're there, you can't ever leave. And now I live in beautiful Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, with my wife, who's a cartoonist and an author herself, Kate Eaton, and our little baby, who you'll hear screaming because she doesn't want to go to bed. And that's me. And so, yeah, I wrote this little book. And so I'm kind of scared of the citizens of Milton. I've heard they're a rough crowd.
As you should be.
And so I just wanted to come here and set the record straight that I have nothing against Milton. I've been to Milton once for about 8 seconds as the train zipped through it on its way to Waterloo for a conference. It was beautiful. I wish the train had stopped. It may have. I don't know. But it was a fleeting moment a few years ago. But it left an impression on me, apparently. But yes, there's a comma. There's a very, very important comma in this book. And so, like you said, the very first line of the book, I'll just read you the very first line. Milton, Ontario, not to be confused with Milton, Ontario. And there's a comma. I don't know if you can see that comma. Very, very important comma. And a footnote. I did my research. The Upper Canadian gristmill town turned squarehead screw capital turned Ontario suburb, named after poet John Milton, best known for his epic poem about the Greater Toronto Area, Paradise Lost. So those are all fun facts that I didn't know about Milton, Ontario until I started to research for the book. John Milton's a famous guy. So, and I do a little bit of woodworking as a hobby and stuff, and the Robertson screw, it's the best screw. Absolutely.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that, Morgan. Don't you worry.
You should be very proud of your screw. So, yes, that comma is very important. And then I go on to say things like, so Milton, Ontario, not to be confused with Milton, Ontario, sits on a bus as it grumbles across the frozen prairie. It's cold like winter, but technically still fall, late 2007. In just over a year, the world's economy will collapse. A junior senator from Illinois will be elected America's first black president. Beverly Hills Chihuahua will be the highest grossing film in theaters. And Milton will be back on the same bus going in the opposite direction. But for now, Milton has left his parents' basement in the middle of nowhere with all his earthly possessions, hopes, and dreams packed into an old hockey bag with a bum zipper wrapped in half a roll of duct tape, headed for the most romantic city in North America, Milton, Ontario. Montreal, sorry. He's left his nowhere behind for somewhere, for something, to become someone, to become, at long last, what he's going to be when he grows up, or that's his half-assed plan anyways. The trouble is, Milton's decided thing he's going to be is a poet. A poet. Not a doctor or a lawyer like his mother encouraged. Not a welder or a pipe fitter like his father insisted. A poet. A poet and a ladies' man, like his hero, Leonard Cohen. So then I go on to describe Milton a little more, and I feel like if you're from Milton, you might take exception to some of the ways I describe Milton, Ontario. But remember, the comma is not there. I'm talking about this totally imaginary person who isn't based on anyone who's ever existed. And never mind that Milton, Ontario is incredibly, spectacularly, remarkably average, plain, boring, humdrum, bland, dull, beige down to its very soul. I didn't take that off of any Milton, Ontario tourism brochures or anything. I just made that up about this fake guy. It has nothing to do with the town. The town is wonderful, I swear. So you might be curious why there's a person named Milton, Ontario, and what kind of parents would name their child after a town that exists. Well, I explain that in the book as well. Just a little further on, I talk about his great-great-great-great-grandfather, Yanni Alatalo. And so Yanni Alatalo, how the outrageous idea of becoming a poet when he grows up comes to nest in the mind of an altogether incredibly average man-child living in the middle of absolutely nowhere is entirely an accident, just like Milton. He was just the latest accidental kid in a long line of accidental Saskatchewan dirt farming Ontarios made in pickup trucks and tractors and farmhouses and grain bins and sod huts and wood sheds, and at least twice in the only bathroom in the old Legion Hall during the Chafe Days Cabaret. A long chain of extraordinarily average dirt farmers who, one after another, worked and drank themselves to unremarkable deaths, but not always in that order, beginning with Yanni Alatalo. Yanni was the illiterate seventh son of a Finnish cobbler from the tiny village of Meskuvara near the tiny town of Kusamo, not far from the Russian border. In the 18-somethings, he fled a Finnish famine to take Canada up on 160 acres of free land in the middle of the bald-headed prairie. The bald-headed prairie that for some 12,000 years or so had fed the Sioux, the Blackfoot, the Cree, and later the Métis just fine until the King of England stole it and gave it to his cousin's startup, a company that traded trinkets for beaver pelts to keep the old country plutocracy in fancy hats. Hats! The history of Canada, the fancy hats, the department store running half a continent, the free land, would be a hilarious Monty Python sketch were it not underwritten by 400 and some years and counting of passive-aggressive genocide. But when it comes down to it, Canada really isn't a country, not in the community-governed chunk of earth inhabited by people belonging to the same tribe sense. It is really just a big company town built around stockpiles of foreign-owned riches. Riches, it was decided, through centuries of squabbles among various versions of white Christian Europeans that were most effectively exploited by poor white Christian refugees fleeing the endless squabbles and turnip famines in Europe, rather than the millions of locals who had the galling tendency to not be white, Christian, European, nor easily bought. The Crown, the Hudson's Bay Company, the Church, the Royal Navy, the Queen's Own Rifles, and the Northwest Mounted Police built the world's biggest company town and gave vast chunks of it freely to illiterate cobbler's sons with no farming or fishing or mining or logging experience, because they were more than happy to break their backs digging up, chopping down, and scooping up the riches of the land and the sea for big hats, big coal, big oil, big agro, big timber, big fish. This particular cobbler's son didn't speak a word of the Queen's English, which didn't much matter on the prairie where it was just a stew of Slavic, Nordic, Germanic dialects and whatever Finnish is. But it mattered when he landed in Montreal and the customs officer asked him his name. After an elaborate game of yellow charades, Yanni, Johnny, Yanni, Johnny, Yanni, Johnny, Yanni, Johnny, Yanni Alatalo became Johnny Ontario and was sent by train to collect his 160 acres near what would become Bellybutton, Saskatchewan. So for those of you who don't know where Bellybutton, Saskatchewan is, here's a map.
Perfect.
And so that's how he became an Ontario. And then I explain later on when he meets his roommates, they're confused as well why Milton, Ontario is in their living room. So I'll read you just that part quickly, and then we can get into the cross-examination. So Milton came in and sat down on the end of the couch farthest from the three of them. So this is the first time he's hanging out with his roommates that he's just moved in with in Montreal. Oh my God, it's you. How's your face? That looks really bad. Ava punched Naughty in the arm. You're such a jerk, Naughty. God. Sorry for smacking you, buddy. I didn't mean nothing by it. George was just having a moment and I figured you could take her better than she could. I'm fine. It was just a misunderstanding. It's all good. Milton pawed at his horse meat with a dirty spoon. He was giving a bowl full of horse meat. I'll explain. Makes perfect sense. It's not weird. Or Ruddy here, screaming like a little baby in the bathtub all night. Shut up, Naughty. I was on shrooms. What's your name, bud? Me? It's Milton, Ontario. Oh, cool. I'm from Timmins. Ava's from Etobicoke. Oh, no, sorry. I'm from Saskatchewan. Oh, I don't know where that is. I'm not familiar with Milton. No, I'm from Ontario, like or I'm not from Ontario, I'm from Saskatchewan. Wait, like Saskatchewan the place? Yeah. They all shared a laugh. Milton wasn't sure why. I can't believe there's a Milton there too. What are the chances? No, that's just my name. It's Milton. Jesus, bye, get your story straight. Naughty's from Newfoundland. That's my terrible Newfoundland accent. I'm sorry. I'm Milton, Ontario. That's my name, like the town. Yeah, but it's just my name. I'm from a little town in the middle of nowhere in Saskatchewan. You're named after a suburb? No, I'm not named after the town. I'm named after the kicker. All three of them looked at Milton like he had a second head. Sorry. Don't you know Doug Milton? Doug who? Doug Milton. He kicked the winning field goal for the Rough Riders in 82. 82? I never heard of him. So this Doug guy, he's from Ontario? No, that's just his last name, like the province. Yeah, I guess. My family was originally from Finland. They were called Alatalo or something, but it got changed at the border. So you're not from Ontario? Jesus, Ruddy Bike, try and keep up. No, I'm from a tiny town in Saskatchewan. What's it called? You've probably never heard of it. It's like 100 people. It's called Bellybutton. That's the name of your town? Oh my God. Now I'll stop there. So clearly you can see, I mean, nothing against the town, Milton, Ontario. It was just some strange coincidences and totally not my fault.
Well, I'm going to interject at that point because on page 71, I believe here, there's some trash talking about Burlington, Brampton. You've got Oakville, Scarborough, Etobicoke. So why was he not Etobicoke, Ontario, or better yet, Oakville, Ontario? That would have been a much more appropriate name. I'm just saying in your next novel.
Have you ever heard of anybody named Etobicoke?
There's always a first Etobicoke.
I do have a second cousin named Oakville, but nobody likes him.
Oh, fair enough. My van actually pronounces it Etobicoke. We're going to Etobicoke, Ontario. So. Etobicoke. So yeah. Okay, so in the passage that you just read, I know belly button is fictitious, or I'm assuming belly button in Saskatchewan is fictitious, but none of the other ones are. So, you mentioned Dildo, Newfoundland. You got Kitty Vitty. You got Montreal. You've got all these beautiful places, and the book really reads like a love song to Canada. So I'm just really curious. It's such a coming of age story for Milton, even though he's not a kid. He's already an adult when it starts, but he grows into his adulthood. But there's so many references to these places along his journey. So can you tell us a little bit about why you chose those places in particular, why they really meant something to you?
Sure. So Belly Button is not a real place, but it is based on a real place. And there is a picture of Belly Button. There's pictures in this book. There's what Belly Button looks like. Belly Button is based on the real village of 100 people called Riverhurst, which is where my grandparents, my mother's mother and father, are from. My grandmother doesn't have a YouTube channel because she swears way too much.
She must be Scottish.
She's something. So I picked Saskatchewan because it's a square. And because that passage I read about the sort of absurdity of Canadian colonialism and things, and I get into it a little bit more about Saskatchewan in particular, is somebody drew a square on a map of a very complicated continent with a history and a geography and a whole bunch of things that existed already and people and places and all of this stuff. And they just drew a square and cut it up into a bunch of little other squares and gave it away to Joe Schmo from Finland or Yanni, Ontario. And that's kind of was a useful symbol in a writing of satire sense for the absurdity of Canadian colonialism and kind of the dark tragicness of it. And I mentioned there's a number of explanatory footnotes, some true, some exaggerated. But where's some footnotes? So there's like big long footnotes explaining John Diefenbaker, the patron saint of Saskatchewan. There's the real Riverhurst is on the banks of Diefenbaker Lake, and Diefenbaker Lake is a man-made lake created by two dams built while John Diefenbaker was prime minister. He's the only prime minister to ever come from Saskatchewan. I guess they learned their lesson. Sorry, Saskatchewan. I'm going to be at the Regina Library someday, and they're going to just and
Saskatoon, you got to watch out for.
Yeah, that's true. So, one footnote, I talk about how where this lake was going to end up when they built the dam. There was this big rock, and this rock, I'm not going to try to pronounce the name because it was an indigenous word, and I don't speak that language, and I'll just ruin it. But it was a very sacred meeting place for indigenous people for millennia. And so in the 1960s, Canada's all excited to build this big dam and electrify southwestern Saskatchewan. And the indigenous leaders in the community asked if they could, maybe move the rock out of the way of this lake that's coming to flood everything. And so the government, in their response, was to pack the rock full of dynamite and blow it up and then hand little chunks out to people. So that's also a very absurd but kind of symbolic thing that happens in Canada. So that's kind of why I picked Saskatchewan. I'm from rural Alberta. A lot of Milton's experiences growing up in Belly Button are very similar to mine growing up in Caroline. Alberta's just a little bit more complicated of a geography and a history and the current political stuff. I didn't want to get into all of that. Saskatchewan's just a nice, neat square. And it's very flat. And then, so Milton ends up in Montreal, and Montreal is this very, for a 22, 23-year-old dummy from the middle of nowhere who doesn't know much about life and seen a few, heard a few Leonard Cohen songs, and maybe seen a few NFB documentaries about him, think Montreal is the most magical, beautiful, romantic place on earth, and they might move there after they finish university to become a famous poet. And you go there, and Montreal, just by coincidence, it has nothing to do with the content of the novel. I lived in Montreal for a year in 2007, and I was part of this really strange Anglophone bubble where everybody I hung out with, everybody I knew, were all English speakers, most of them from Milton, Ontario. They all were, a lot of people were from, the GTA, either going to McGill or Concordia, or I had roommates and stuff who were in their 30s and 40s who just wanted to live in Montreal and live this life, because you could live in Montreal very cheaply. I shared a really dumpy apartment, very similar to the one in the book, but not the one in the book. I had a window in my room. I think I paid like $150 a month rent. Yeah. So you could work like barely at all and make rent and go to all these, concerts and house shows and anarchist potlucks and just live like a real bohemian. So there's this kind of weird little Anglophone bubble of Montreal, and it was completely divorced from real Montreal, from all the francophones in Montreal, from all the history of Montreal and of Quebec and all the complicatedness of all of that. None of that existed in this bubble. It was just summer camp for GTA refugees. And then Milton ends up coincidentally in St. John's, Newfoundland, and I went there completely non-related reasons in grad school, and I spent 9 years in St. John's. And St. John's is a wonderful, beautiful place. Newfoundland is unlike any place you will ever be in your life. If you think it's like somewhere and you're putting off going, you're wrong. It is another planet. It's really far from Canada, and you don't realize this. When I started grad school, I drove from the farm, from Caroline, which is near Red Deer, kind of in between Calgary and Edmonton. So I drove from the foothills of the Rockies to Newfoundland, and it took 8 days. And it took 4 days to get to Halifax. So right. It took 3.5 days to get from Halifax to St. John's, because you drive through all of Nova Scotia, and then you ride a boat all night, and then you drive another 12 hours to get to St. John's. St. John's is really far away, and it's if you put a pin on the place of the earth that had the worst weather and then built a city there, that would be St. John's. There would be stretches of time where you go like 3 months, and I'm not making this part up. You go 3 months without seeing the sun, and after 3 months without seeing the sun, a city of 100,000 people, they all want to murder each other. But the second the sun comes out, it's like the most glorious, it's like a Hollywood musical. Everybody's out dancing and high-stepping down the street, and Colin is sick at work, so they can have a barbecue and go hang out in the park because it's only sunny for a week a year. But the weather kind of bands everybody together. So some of my favorite memories of St. John's were snow days. It snows 400 centimeters per winter there. It also rains about 400 centimeters, so you'll get 4 feet of snow, and then it will rain, and so your socks are wet for 10 months of the year. But there was a lot of snow days, and so on snow days, everybody would get to sleep, would play snow day roulette, first of all, so everybody would stay up late drinking the night before, and you'd hope there was enough snow for them to shut down work. And then the next morning, you would sleep in a little bit, and then everybody around 10 o'clock would come out of their house. And I lived in those little colorful jelly bean row houses, and everybody would come out and be shoveling their cars out and their sidewalks off and everything, and it'd be like a street festival impromptu thing, and it was a lot of fun. So I loved St. John's. I loved all of Newfoundland. So yeah, I wrote about these places that I spent some time in and that I really knew well. It's my first book, so I didn't want to screw it up that bad. So I wanted to write about places I knew that I could sort of make up the setting convincingly. But yeah, there were these very unique places. So, and there's Milton, Ontario. It's in the book too.
Right in the middle. No, it really spoke to me too, because when I like you, I went out to Montreal when I was 18. I was a little younger, but the drinking age is that much lower, so that was where I went. So I had a job up in the mountains, and I can remember I lived with a bunch of Belgians, and they took me to, it was bizarre, and Casino de Montreal had opened just, maybe 5 or 6 years prior. So I'd never been to a casino. I'd never really been to a bar, and they take me in there, and I had been called tête carré repeatedly, and I didn't know what it meant, and there was no cell phones back then. There was no Google, and it wasn't until later that I realized they were calling me squarehead, and that I didn't know what I was saying. And I was the Anglophone. So they took me to a bar downtown, and I walked in, and Leonard Cohen is playing, but they've got rave music pumping in the background, so it's that gravelly, deep voice. And I was terrified. Everyone was. It sounds really strange now. They were all dressed as vampires, and it was the 90s. I ran out of that bar so fast. So it was but I can remember being at a dinner table with some Francophones, and because I didn't ask for my food in French, they wouldn't pass it to me, and they were yelling at me. And it was a very interesting and terrifying experience when I was young. Having gone to Newfoundland, everything you're saying also rings true. And I loved it in the book. I just loved how you captured the people there. One of my favorite stories, my girlfriend Sarah and I went last September before the pandemic hit. Yeah. And it was the morning. We were sitting on a street corner on a bench having a coffee, and this man walked up to us and said, do you girls have a cigarette? I said, oh, no, sorry, sir, we don't smoke. So he took a cigarette out of his pack and threw it in my purse. It was unbelievable. Walking out into the street in the car stop. That's scary, right? So the cars stop and you cross, and then you feel very guilty and confused. Yes. It was just
if you're trying to turn left on a busy street, oncoming traffic will stop, but you don't know if everybody's going to stop. You take your life into your hands. Everybody's just being polite, except it just takes one person to kill you, so you never know.
So, well, I wouldn't do it at all in Milton, so there you go.
Do they have stimulants in Milton? They don't have anything done.
It's terrifying. Oh, that's great. Well, we should really talk about the library, because that's another contentious point that I have with you in your book. So I don't know if you want to read the passage. It's on, maybe I'll read it for you. I'll give you a break. Let's see here. Here we go. The other reason Guillaume keeps Gueltas, is that correct?
Yes.
Gueltas, around is that his arms are long enough, slender enough, and supple enough to fit through the after-hours book deposit box slot at the library. Stealing library books is technically theft, but it makes for the perfect low-overhead business. Each morning, before the library opens, Gueltas, who lives in an apartment up the street, fishes whatever books he can out of the after-hours book deposit box. That's really bad. Then the pair spend the day sanding the stamps off the new inventory, while Guillaume rattles on about the travesty that are turbans in the police force and Gueltas hums Wagner. And because Guillaume owns the building outright and doesn't bother paying any kind of taxes, he learned long ago that City Hall was so corrupt that they wouldn't pursue tax delinquents unless someone complained about the stink of a rotting corpse. What meager sales they do have are pure profit and well-stocked in unfiltered cigarettes and sherry. These are not good people on many levels, but no. The detail through which you talk about stealing these books and sanding things off and repurposing. I mean, you're brilliant, and there is a market for ex-library books, but we're all kind of wondering if this is from personal experience. Did you do some research? Like, how does one gain this information? You must have tried.
Well, my day job is in economic development, and so I help entrepreneurs develop business plans. And so one I often suggest is stealing library books, because they give them to you for free. I'm kidding. Do not ever steal a library book.
So
That's
bad.
A terrible idea.
We keep dogs in our book drop room, so if you stick your arm in, they bite you. So Milton, you can't steal a book.
Dare you to try it, Milton. You'll
right. It's another
go back a bloody stump. Yes, don't steal library books.
That's right.
So I swear this place existed in Montreal. I lived vaguely where Milton did. And between these two little fruit stands and between the library and the YMCA on Avenue du Parc, there was this little hole in the wall bookstore. And it didn't have any signs or anything. And I went in there once and it was terrifying. And it was full of smoke. And they had like 6 English books. But there was this guy sanding the edges of the books. And I didn't know why. I bought one book there and it was very smooth. I don't know if he was sanding the smoke damage off from chain smoking in his bookstore for every day for 1,000 years, or he could have technically been sanding the library stamps off. On a totally unrelated note, there's a link to my website where you can buy special signed editions of Dirty Birds.
Can I jump in for a second, Morgan? I'm going to point that out. At the bottom here, it takes you to Morgan's website. Absolutely. Due to the overwhelming demand of this book and how good it is, must be the Milton Ontario connection. This is a hard book to get your hands on. So Morgan has some copies through his website. Milton Public Library, we, thank you to Edmund from White Hots, my new best friend. He got us some copies for us to put into circulation. Every copy is out right now. There's a massive holds list, so that's wonderful. I do have a very limited number of books here at the library. So if anyone in Milton wants one, please do contact us through our email or give us a call, and we'll gladly sell one to you, no problem at all. But Morgan was also really, really cool about donating a book to the cause tonight. So if you'd like to be entered to win a copy of the book that Morgan's going to explain the provenance behind, you just need to go to our Facebook channel. We are actually broadcasting on Facebook Live, or you can just go to our regular platform. And the first person to write the name of the band that Milton writes an epic poem about and actually performs in a bar for his the woman that he is quite in love with, Robin. The first person to write that band down wins. So it's a very Canadian band. You could probably guess it. Thank you, Morgan. Go ahead.
So I was just going to say quickly about that epic poem. It is totally made up. There's no YouTube videos out there of somebody who looks kind of like me, but dirtier, reading that same poem 13 years ago at a francophone open mic.
Wink.
So it's a pandemic, and times are tough. There's no money in writing or publishing in Canada, anyways, just because it's a tough game. So I'm selling books on my website for the list price, $22.95, perfectly fine, legitimate deal. You have to pay shipping, it's a little bit extra. But I found a great source of low-cost books because my publisher, they charge me full price for these books because they've got to make a dime. So I found a great source of books in Montreal. So if you order them, I'll send it to you. They're a little different. So this one is my own personal copy that I paid normal money for. But the ones on my website, they have this like plastic cover on the front. That's kind of just how they come, and they have a little sticker on the bottom that I wish I had one to show you, but I'm all sold out of those too. It has a little sticker with some letters and stuff. I don't know what that's about, and it has a little envelope, and it's got these. They're cheap because if somebody puts stamps on them, it doesn't matter what the stamps say, but I include a little piece of sandpaper with each one. So you can remove the stamps if you want. It says something like property of Millennial Library or something, but it's in French, so I don't speak French well enough. So I get those for a good deal. So if you buy those, I'm making a lot of money, and I can, put my kid in private school and all kinds of things, buy a third house. So if you're looking to do that, I appreciate that. And also check out my mom's YouTube channel.
That's right. She should get one of those buttons at the bottom, buy a book from Morgan, and you should have buy an outfit from my mom.
I wish she'd promote my book. She's ashamed.
Oh, that's fantastic. So let's talk about the physicality of this book.
Yes.
So funny story. We saw the illustrations on the front, and I was really quite taken with them and thought, oh my God, I wonder who did that. And I saw it was Kate Beaton, who is amazing, and we love her. especially as librarians, and we do judge books by their cover here. So I
sure,
thought,
that's the best thing about this book.
But I thought, wouldn't it be hilarious if we like called Kate Beaton and had her come on to the interview and could be a surprise guest. So I ran it by my friend Carly, and she's like, you know, that's his wife, right? I'm like, no, didn't know that at all. That would have been really embarrassing.
She's upstairs trying to get a baby to sleep.
Yeah. Wow, living the dream, right? Living the dream. But yeah, I mentioned it to our librarian team here, and they all went insane because I didn't realize Kate actually published kids' books too. So our children's librarian was losing it. So just let her know that we're coming for her next. We'd love to have her. And is she working on anything now? Are you working on anything now? Are you just
working on everything now?
Right. All at the same time?
She's putting the baby to bed. She's going to have another baby in August.
Congratulations. That's exciting.
Yes. Meanwhile, she has a graphic novel coming out in probably 2022. It's amazing. You should read Dirty Birds in the meantime.
Absolutely.
Lower your expectations, and then this book will blow your mind. It's kind of funny in a way. After university, I moved to Montreal to become a dirty bird and be an idiot. Katie, the smart, reasonable one, she moved to Fort McMurray to pay off her student loans. And so her graphic novel is about her 2 years she spent in Fort Mac paying off her student loans. So it's quite a book. And she's working on more picture books for kids. She's working on some top secret stuff we're not allowed to talk about until it happens, and you'll see it and you'll be like, wow, this is amazing. And I kind of just sit in the corner fighting with the baby while she makes magic happen. And I'm just glad that I'm the third most talented person in this house.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like an incredibly creative house. Why did you choose, or did you choose the size, the format, the heft of this?
It wasn't a fight per se, but there was a back and forth with the publisher about all of this. And huge thank you to Breakwater Books for humoring my neuroses. I wanted everything to, it's weird. I wanted everything to kind of be related to the themes and the plot and everything of the book. So I wanted it to be trade paperback, sort of pulp book size. So it's smaller than an ordinary book. I don't know if I have an ordinary book handy by, but it's a smallish size. It fits in your hand. I wanted it to be printed on sort of pulpier paper, not nice paper. And I wanted it to be like that because it's kind of, Milton packs around in his hockey bag covered with duct tape all these sort of, the canon of books written by lousy men. So like Beautiful Losers by Leonard Cohen, and The Sun Also Rises by Hemingway, and Catcher in the Rye, and The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz, and all of these like classic books written by white men about white men being stupid and heroic. And so this book is one of the seriouser themes of that, is kind of a comment on all of that. So I wanted the book to be kind of like that. I wanted it to be kind of like if you're stealing a book from the library, this is the one you would steal. Don't steal books from the library. And the font is actually called Avira.
Oh.
Avira serif. And it's a font I discovered a few years ago, where some enterprising internet guy took every font on his computer, like 725 other fonts, and with Photoshop figured out how to take the average geographic or shape of those fonts and make the average font. So Avira is like the Portuguese word for average. And so Milton, the most average person on the face of the earth, the book about him is written in the most average font on the face of the earth. And then I pushed hard to get these diagrams and illustrations. The wonderful and talented Kate Beaton did none of these. I am to blame for these sketchy sketchy ones. And I think there's 60 some like full page ones, and then like each chapter there's a Newfoundland taxi. Each chapter has a little bird, and each section has a big 2-page spread. And so I wanted to just kind of tell Milton's story with objects. So if you flip through fast enough and don't read any of the words, you can still kind of get an idea of what happens to the guy. I've always been a big fan of novels with illustrations ever since I was a kid, reading kids' novels with illustrations all the way up to being an adult. And there's very few for adults. Breakfast of the Champions by Kurt Vonnegut is one. But I had a hard time figuring out how to do it properly, so I just made it up. And some of the images add to the humor. Some of them are a nice little break. Some of them are more profound than that. But yeah, so it was the whole object itself was a project and made it much more difficult, I think.
I bet, but I love that. I love that. Just like you have markers in a city when you're wandering around, these were kind of markers as you were reading through. So it was a really neat feature. I've been remiss in asking people to please, there's a button at the bottom that says ask a question. So if you'd like to ask a question of Morgan, please write it on the ask a question button. You can put it in the chat, but I have a low attention span and I can't see both at the same time. Okay, wonderful. I don't see any questions in the chat right now, so that's good. I had a question. Obviously, this book, the central focus is really Leonard Cohen. So I grew up in a Canadian household where my mom listened to Joni Mitchell, Gordon Lightfoot, and Leonard Cohen. That's all we heard. That gravelly voice, and I'm waiting for my boss to make fun of me.
Maybe you did a bit earlier.
Yeah, because I sound like Bianca Del Rio. Yeah, which is probably true. Not today, Satan. Not today. Sorry, I just made Ashley laugh. That's terrible. Okay. I've lost my question, Morgan. I'm falling apart over here.
It's your boss's fault.
That's right. That's right. Oh, it was a simple question anyway. Why Leonard? Was it the Montreal angle? Was it the Canadiana of it? And then why did you make him so mean? He's so mean. He's such a bad guy.
Spoiler alert. Leonard Cohen is a bad guy.
Listen to his music. You'll find it.
Leonard Cohen in the book. Again, people, this is a work of fiction. Do not take any life advice. Do not take any tourism advice. Milton, Ontario is wonderful.
Right, nailed it.
Leonard Cohen, the person, is fabulous artist. Leonard Cohen, the character in this book, is a real scumbag. And Leonard, people ask me about that a lot. And even before the book was published, even as I was writing it, I let a few friends read a sneak peek. And them and my editor, one of the first comments back was always, does it have to be Leonard Cohen? Can it be somebody who's just like looks like Leonard Cohen? Somebody who wears a fedora and sings poor, bad songs about gross things? Does it have to be Leonard? And it did have to be Leonard. I thought about it a lot. We talked through it. It had to be Leonard. And Leonard Cohen is this very fascinating figure. And he's kind of like the Saskatchewan is to colonialism what Leonard Cohen is to masculinity, as far as I'm concerned.
Wow.
Where he's, I don't know if that's true or not, but he cultivated this caricature of a poet, of an artist. I don't know if he did it. I know he did it on purpose, but I don't know if he was like in on the kind of absurdity of it and how it was kind of a joke from the get-go. I feel like by the end, he was so into that character that he was nothing else than that. And he became like this unreal person and the symbol of a person. So when you say Leonard Cohen, you see the fedora, the dark suit, the terrible voice. It's a bad impersonation. And he's it was funny in St. John's every year at Christmas. I don't know if they still do this, but they did when I lived there. They have the Feast of Cohen, where all the like famous musicians from Newfoundland would be home for Christmas time, and they'd get together at the big theater in town that held like 1,500 people, and they would sell out 3 or 4 nights where they just play Leonard Cohen songs. So the man has been canonized as like a saint. But in writing this book, I wanted Milton to look up to this caricature of a poet and aspire to be this unreal kind of poet. I know real poets, and they're wonderful, normal people, and nothing wrong with them other than they write poetry. But Leonard, sorry, poets, I'm kidding. Leonard was never that. He was this pop star. He was hugely rich and famous, but all the while he pretended like he was this poor, struggling Montreal poet, even though he's like living large in Greece off of his record sales, or hiding out in a Buddhist monastery for some reason. And of course, Leonard Cohen got duped out of all his money because he didn't care about money. He was Leonard Cohen. And you kind of feel bad for the guy, but you kind of don't. But when I was writing the book, I listened to a lot of his songs, and there's some Easter egg quotes and stuff in the book. But a lot of his songs are really icky. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it flared up the other day when this is all I'll say political about the United States, but Joe Biden had the memorial event for the victims of COVID-19, and I can't remember who it was, but a famous musician covered Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen. And as everyone on Twitter rightfully pointed out, that song's about sex. It was inappropriate at a memorial service. And I feel like I can point that out because when my grandfather passed away when I was in my earlier 20s, and just dumber than I am now, he had 3 grandchildren, my brother, my sister, and I. And so we all wanted to do some kind of tribute. So I wrote a thing, kind of eulogy, and my sister did a message for our grandmother. And my brother, we all agreed, and we all encouraged him, we all helped him, learned Hallelujah, and he played it at our grandfather's funeral.
Oops.
Oops, looking back now, I was like, oops. And so he like, but the thing about Hallelujah is it's written in a very poetic, very kind of vague and artsy kind of way, so that you've got to really like dig to get to the ooh part of it. Otherwise, it sounds like a church song. But Leonard also cut to the chase in a few songs, and he has a song called "Don't Go Home with Your Heart On" from the album "Death of a Ladies' Man." Right. It didn't make it as a #1 hit for some reason. It's got to be the creepiest, most god-awful song. It's about how his dad was a barber/pimp, and right. His mom was a prostitute who worked out of his barbershop.
And he was from Milton, Ontario. Just kidding.
And he's from Milton, Ontario. Yeah, so I don't feel too bad if Leonard gets poked at a little bit. There's a lot of kind of poking at Canadian sacred cows in here, and Leonard is canonized as a Canadian saint, and it's ridiculous because he wrote mostly about sex, or mostly about how he held a grudge against Janis Joplin his whole life for calling him ugly while they were hooking up. Right. And he made a lot of money off of that, and he became famous, and he's been dead for years, and there's a giant building-sized mural of his face in downtown Montreal, and somebody on Goodreads said my treatment of Leonard Cohen was brutal and gave me 1 star.
Well, you should never read those things.
I can't help it. My other favorite bad Goodreads review is somebody complained that the book was too small for their giant hands.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry.
That's funny.
Anyway, so yeah, Leonard Cohen, I'm not convinced he's a saint. I can make fun of him a little bit. He'll be okay. He can haunt me if he wants.
It was perfect because you have Milton Ontario, who is the everyman. He's the average, and he's stupid, and he just messes up all over the place. But you root for him through the whole thing, right? And Leonard Cohen, I mean, he's not the most attractive man. He's not the best singer. He's not necessarily, this is awful, not necessarily the best poet. But Canadians have rooted for him for decades. So he kind of felt like a fitting, protagonist, antagonist, really. So it was neat to see. It was cool. But Gordon Lightfoot might have been better, just saying.
just closing thoughts on Leonard Cohen. The most pithy thing I ever heard him say was he won a Juno or a Lifetime Achievement Award or some made up Canadian appreciation of Leonard Cohen Award. And he said, only in a country like this can a man with a voice like mine win an award like this. Which is very true. And the other thing is he's a scumbag in the book, and he has ties to the underworld. I won't ruin that for you, but in a 1991 episode of Miami Vice, he played a mob boss.
Get out!
Look it up on YouTube. He just has like a 2-second cameo. He picks up a phone and he goes, "Cherchez la femme," and hangs up.
So did you know that before or after?
No, I found it after, and I lost my
wow. You lost your mind. That's funny. Cherchez la femme. Tabernacle. Okay, so if anyone has any questions, please do ask. We're running short on time here. There is one in here, and I know who wrote it. This is our children's librarian who's mildly obsessed with Kate Beaton. She's asking, have you and Kate ever discussed the possibility of writing something together?
We have discussed it. Right now we're collaborating on families and children. And so far we're doing well with she's cute. She's a lot, but Mary is adorable. So that's our first successful collaboration. We'll see how the second one goes in August. But yeah, once Kate's done her 5,000 project she's working on now, and meanwhile I need to figure out what I'm going to do next, because I didn't think anybody would read this book, and now we're sold out. So I don't know how that happened. So people might want to read the second one. So I'll get working on that. And so when we're all done all of those things, we've talked about kids' books, picture books. We've talked about YA books. We've talked about doing different things, podcasts and different things. So there's always ideas floating around, and we just need to pick one and run with it. So one day, maybe, we'll see.
Excellent. How has this experience changed your entire view of everything? I mean, what were you doing when you found out that you were longlisted for the CBC Canada Reads? That's a huge thing here in Canada. I know in the library, the second that list comes out, I'm on the librarians to order every copy and get your lists ready and your read-alikes, because it goes so fast. It's a big thing here. So what did it do for you? What was it like? Yeah,
so we found out the day before they announced it publicly. They sent an email to my publisher early in the morning, and they forwarded it to me. And the best thing Katie and I collaborate on is our sleep schedule. So if one of us has to get up in the night, the other one will get up in the morning and let the other person sleep in. So it was my turn to sleep in. So I got up around like 8:30 or some reasonable time. And I had this email in my inbox from my publisher who was like, "Oh!" And it's a big deal for my publisher and for Atlantic Canada. I didn't know this till they told me, but it's the first independently published Atlantic Canadian book to be on the long list since 2014, when they changed the format. There's been a lot of Atlantic authors, and there's a woman from Halifax has a book in the finals right now, and several of my friends from Newfoundland, Sharon Balla and Megan Gale Coles and Lisa Moore, have been on the show and done well. But they're all published by those big, terrible Toronto publishers that are ruining the world. Just kidding. I'd love a huge book deal. Beautiful Toronto publishers. My publisher was very excited, and we spent a week working very hard to get a bunch of events and promotional stuff lined up, so people couldn't back out after if we didn't make the short list. And yeah, they sold out of the first print run. They're printing more coming mid-February. It'll have a little sticker that says almost sort of didn't win Canada Reads on it on here. There's a number of other things that I can't talk about yet, but one day soon will, and so the book will have an extended life, hopefully, which has been nice because it came out in the middle of a pandemic, which was kind of weird, apparently. And yeah, I'm doing events like this, several of them until March, and I just keep going and going. So it's if this is what being an author is like, it's pretty neat. Before I thought it was just you put a book out in the world and then you hide. JD Salinger for it, but no, it's fun to get. Today I'm in Milton. Tomorrow I'm doing an event at the Caroline Library, which will be just my mom and like 3 of her friends tisking me about all the curse words. Yesterday I did a podcast in Michigan, so it's great to get to meet all these people and talk about this weird book and slander Leonard Cohen and defend the beautiful town of Milton, Ontario.
Absolutely. Well, and it's cool that you get to put this book out in the world for sure, but you're putting Canada out in the world too, which is pretty amazing. And I know we're putting together some extra reading lists, some East Coast stuff, some, Buildings Romans, some cross Canada stuff to kind of feed that hole until your next shipment comes out and we can buy more books. So definitely our website for that. Of course, we're right at the end and people are asking questions. So I think they were so engrossed in what you were saying. So I'm going to quickly, there's one here that I am going to ask before we completely run out of time. I think we've waited long enough so your kid's asleep and you can go watch a show or something. People are asking about the Kurt Vonnegut comparison, calling you the Canadian Kurt Vonnegut. And I saw that, was it Will Ferguson that made that connection as well? And good God, how did that feel?
That was the other moment. I get to do an event with the Calgary Bookstore in a couple weeks with Will Ferguson, and I'm nervous as heck.
Wow.
His first book, Why I Hate Canadians, was one of my favorite books. I found it when I just started university, and I was, fresh off the farm, and it was written in this very kind of smart-ass voice, and it's very tongue-in-cheek and irreverent, and I was like, oh, I love this style. I'm going to write like this and be a writer and study Canada. And I met him. He had a book launch event in 2003, I think, and I went with my Why I Hate Canadians. It's all dog-eared, and I was shaking, and I went up and I was like, hello, Mr. Ferguson, and this is my favorite book, and it changed my life, and thank you, and I want to be a writer someday just like you. And I was just fawning over him, and he was very gracious, and he's like, oh, that's cool, right on. Well, if you ever write anything and you want me to read, just send it to me. And he wrote his email in the book.
Oh my God.
Authors, don't do that.
Wow.
Because somebody 15 years later might actually write a book.
Right.
And so the publisher said, we need blurbs. Do you know any famous authors? And it's like, well, other than my wife. So I emailed Will Ferguson out of the blue and said, hey, we're trying to publish this book on really short notice. Do you think you'd be interested in even giving it having a look at it? And I reminded him, and I sent him a picture of the page where he wrote this contract. I sent him like a Word document early draft. It was garbage. And he read it over one weekend and sent back a blurb comparing me to Kurt Vonnegut, and I died. And
wow.
I've not come alive ever since. So Will Ferguson is the nicest man on earth, and I'm nervous to have to talk to him in a couple of weeks. But and some reviews have said that too, and it's all of it's not true, but it's sold books, so that's great. Kurt Vonnegut is just otherworldly. He's one of the top 10 in my books all time, like Shakespeare style. So just to be even mentioned in his company is such a tremendous honor. And how do you write a second book after somebody says that?
It's amazing. You just start, right? Well, again, Milton Public Library thinks that you're Canada's Vonnegut too. So we're very excited.
Thanks, Milton.
Welcome. We're very excited to share your book with our community and with the greater community. I'll follow up with you tomorrow with an email and let you know who won our Facebook book. Whoever was able to guess the very secret band name of the band in Canada nobody likes. And thank you so much for coming and doing this. Congratulations on an incredible book. Congratulations on getting recognition for said incredible book. And we're very much looking forward to your success in the future. You're welcome back to Milton anytime. If this pandemic ever ends, we're taking you for a beer at Eddio's. And we're all going to sit on the patio and we'll toast Milton, Ontario and Milton, Ontario. So thank you once again.
You're all right in my books, Milton.
We passed the test. Thanks, Morgan.
Thank you so much.
Have a lovely evening and enjoy the rest of your tour.
Thank you. My loser tour. Thank you so much. Good night, Mom. Love you.
I'm just going to hop over to YouTube now and check out the sewing channel. So everybody have a good
day.
day.
129, so you got some catching up to do.
That's pretty impressive. I've got a lot of sewing to do. Everyone take good care. Have a fabulous night. And thanks again, Morgan. Good night.
Thanks so much. See everybody.
Bye.